Welcome back to the Law News Network. What you just saw was the reading of the verdict of Zachary Adams. He was found guilty on all charges on Friday, September the 22nd. Due to the fact that he was found guilty on all charges, he was then we then moved to the death penalty phase. However, an agreement was reached on Saturday between the prosecution and the defense. We have with us Burton Staggs, who is the news director at WOPC HD News, a local news radio station. Thank you so much for being with us, Burton.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And I know that you provided some great commentary for us on Friday with Aaron, and we're so lucky to have you here with us today. Now, we know that you were in the courtroom for pretty much the entirety of the trial. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
The entirety of the trial.
Right. So if you would be able to tell us what was the atmosphere in the room as this verdict was being read, especially since the jury was polled with pretty much each and every single charge. So let us know, what was the atmosphere like in the courtroom? Was it tense?
Oh, it was extremely tense. You could see the looks on people's faces. The atmosphere was nothing like I've ever witnessed before until the next day. I'm sure we'll talk about that soon.
Right.
But the thing that I noticed the most was how everybody turned to the jury, was looking at them, to the judge, and then watching the demeanor of the defendant.
What about the members of the jury? How were they? Were they stoic? Was anyone crying at the time when the verdict was read? Tell us a little bit more about that.
You took the word out of my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
The word I was going to use was stoic. They sat stoic, just stone-faced.
Oh my goodness. I can only imagine, because this was such even though the trial was moved to a county that was won over, we understand from you and I discussing that, you know, both towns are pretty much small. So a lot of people knew the story of actually what happened to Holly Bobo. So I'm pretty sure there was a lot of pressure that was relieved for a lot of members of the jury. But would you be able to tell, what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about the agreement between the state and the defense to remove the death penalty off of the table. Do you have any knowledge about that at all that you could tell us?
The only knowledge I had was a member of the Supreme Court who was helping and assisting with the media. She came in, stuck her head in, and she said, "We have a big announcement. You guys might want to get in the courtroom." Wow. That's about as much lead as we had.
Wow, because from my experience and being a former prosecutor, a lot of the times we realize when an ultimate penalty is therefore lowered, a lot of the times the families will have will be able to have some kind of a say as to whether or not this will happen. So did you hear anything in regards to whether or not the family members were okay with removing the death penalty off of the table?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. They reluctantly agreed to that, but I think for the first time since April of 2013, or excuse me, April of 2011, mm-hmm. the Bobos finally had a say in what happened.
Wow.
And they used that.
Wow, that's pretty amazing, because I know, and we'll play a little bit of this clip later for our viewers, but I know that Karen Bobo, she specifically stated on the stand that what happened had nothing, or the agreement that was made had nothing to do with actually saving him, or had anything to do with Zachary Adams. So that's kind of interesting that you stated that they reluctantly agreed to doing that. I know that that was something that must have been very hard and difficult on their part, due to the fact that there was someone lost. Their daughter was lost as a result of this heinous act.
She addressed us in the media room, and she told us that it had everything to do with finding peace for their family and hoping to move forward.
Okay.
It has a lot to do, I'm sure, with taking the 3 mandatory appeals in Tennessee off the table in the death sentence. And a lot of people don't think about it, but they have not been able to bury their child.
Right.
This allows them to bury their child soon.
Right. Now, in regards to the community as a whole, do you think that the community had any sort of, I guess, negative input into the fact that the death penalty was taken off of the table here?
I think a lot of people wanted him to pay the ultimate price. Mm-hmm. But in the end, that is the Bobo's decision.
Right. And, you have to give it to them. I mean, that's the strength of a family, being able to decide whether or not someone lives or dies, and it was pretty much in their hands whether or not they were going to move forward, with the death penalty phase, because no ultimate decision was made because we never got to that point. What I really also want to talk about with you is the backlash from the community regarding the investigation. We know that we found out, this was bombshell testimony, that we found out that the investigators in this case really realized that after a certain point that they had completely went the wrong way in their investigation. Right. Talk a little bit about that to us, if you will.
Well, it looks like for the first 2.5, 3 years of this investigation, that the TBI focused solely on sex offenders, and one in particular, Terry Britt.
Okay.
If you listen to TBI agent Terry Dykas's testimony, he says he was told by the FBI's BAU, Behavioral Analysis Unit, that he was looking for a single male sexual predator. And apparently he did develop tunnel vision. He kept going and kept going in that direction. He found Terry Britt, and Terry Britt is a very, very bad man, but he didn't hurt Holly Bobo.
Right. That's, I think that was something that really hit the prosecution hard. The fact that they continuously expounded and continuously investigated Terry Britt. However, there was the alibi, or the purported alibi from the defendants here in this case, that really fell through. If they had followed through with the stories that were given by Zachary Adams, Shane Austin, that ultimately they may have found this a lot earlier, rather than how long it took for the investigation to actually occur, for them to realize that Zachary Adams was the one who actually had something to do with this, unfortunately.
Oh, absolutely. The evidence was there. They just, let's use the word botched it. They just botched it. The Tennessee Highway Patrol had Zach Adams on their radar within 3 days. Karen Bobo had her radar on Zach Adams within a week.
So another thing is what I'd like to talk to you about a little bit is the fact that I want to talk about the judge here, and what we saw a little bit, and I know that we discussed this a little bit off air, was the fact that the judge was advising individuals of the jury that he actually may have known them. Now, coming from the big city, we don't find that often. We don't find that the judge will speak to members of the jury and actually say that he knows, or he or she knew, some members of their family. A lot of people may find that odd. Tell us why that's not so odd here in Decatur.
Why it's not so odd. As we discussed off air, Decatur County is a county of under 12,000 people. I believe that it's 11,575 was my research. It is not uncommon to be walking down the streets and know basically every person you see. As you and I spoke, being from Manhattan, you guys have neighborhoods and housing areas that are larger than this entire county. These people literally know everybody. You walk into the restaurant, you know somebody. You go to the baseball games, you know someone. The judge basically just told a couple of jury members, your kids, your grandkids play baseball with my grandkids.
Okay. Now, I had to do a little bit of research before we spoke today, but I found something that you wrote on your Twitter in regards to the opioid epidemic here and how this had an effect on the trial. Specifically, you wrote, "It's imperative that we call on our legislature to work on solutions to the opioid addiction pandemic. Facing our state and all of our courts, other drugs, Holly Bobo's death is directly tied to the culture." Tell us a little bit about that.
That quote actually came from the current sheriff, Keith Bird of Decatur County. We sat down and talked about another arrest during the trial, and we got to discussing the fact that every aspect of this case, when you lead back to it, starts with opioid addiction that led to methamphetamine, heroin addiction, and down the road, it played directly into the abduction and murder of Holly Bobo. Drugs are pervasive in the rural South, and it's just getting worse. And we do have to find some way to stop that.
Right. Another thing that I wanted to discuss, We heard something about a $250,000 award that supposedly would be given. Do you know anything about this?
I do recall back in before her body was found and early on when this case was breaking, there was a reward of up to $250,000.
Right.
I do. It seems like I recall at the time it was for her safe return, but there are rumors that some of the people may have came forward to try to claim that reward.
Right, and that's something I believe that Jennifer Thompson discussed after the verdict was read, and she may have alluded to the fact that it's possible that the $250,000 award may have been or may be dispersed to individuals who testified, but after, of course, after the preclusion of the trial. Do you think that statement that she made, do you think that may have had anything to do with how individuals actually testified? If that's the case.
I mean, it could have if it's the case. Victor Dinsmore, I noticed, who was a key witness, he is the one that allegedly purchased the murder weapon. He posted in 2016, long before we knew about the gun, that he wanted to help solve this case because his son had been murdered and he felt like it was his duty.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Well, one last question for you.
Sure.
Would you have liked to have seen Zachary Adams testify? Now, we know that he's under no duty to do so as a defendant in this case, and we know that he had priors that probably would not have boded well for him if he were to take the stand, especially due to the great tactical cross-examination by the prosecutors here in this case. Would you have liked to have seen him on the stand?
I think everybody would have liked to have seen Adams take the stand, and I think that would have and hopefully answered the major question. And that's the question that remains and what I'm working on today and you're going to start forward on. Why Holly Bobo? Why did they choose Holly Bobo?
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. I had a great time speaking with you, and welcome. We welcome you back. We'd love to have you back here again.
I would love to be back. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.